Ward 13 of the old county hospital was always shrouded in an eerie atmosphere. It was the psychiatric ward where the most disturbed and dangerous patients were housed. The walls were lined with padded cells, and the air was thick with the smell of antiseptic and despair. The nurses and doctors who worked on Ward 13 were a brave and dedicated bunch. They saw and dealt with things that would make most people's blood run cold. But even they couldn't help but be affected by the dark energy that permeated the ward. There were stories whispered about strange occurrences on Ward 13. Patients would disappear without a trace, only to be found later wandering the halls in a daze. Shadows would move in the corners of rooms, and voices would echo through the empty corridors. One of the most disturbing stories was about a young woman named Sarah. Sarah had been admitted to Ward 13 after suffering a severe mental breakdown. She was withdrawn and unresponsive, and the doctors were concerned that she might be a danger to herself. One night, Sarah's nurse was doing her rounds when she found Sarah's bed empty. She searched the entire ward, but Sarah was nowhere to be found. The nurse was starting to panic when she heard a noise coming from the padded cells. She cautiously approached the cells and peered through the small windows. Inside, she saw Sarah sitting in the corner, rocking back and forth. Her eyes were wide and unfocused, and her lips were moving silently. The nurse tried to talk to Sarah, but she ignored her. The nurse then called for backup, and a team of doctors and nurses rushed to the scene. They managed to coax Sarah out of the cell, but she was still in a trance. They took her to the doctor's office and tried to calm her down. But Sarah started to scream and thrash about. She had a wild look in her eyes, and she seemed to be possessed by some unseen force. The doctors were forced to sedate Sarah, but she remained in a coma for several days. When she finally woke up, she had no memory of what had happened. The doctors never figured out what caused Sarah's strange behavior. But the nurses and doctors on Ward 13 were convinced that it was something supernatural. Another disturbing incident occurred on Ward 13 when a male patient named John hanged himself in his cell. He was found the next morning by a nurse, and his body was removed to the morgue. But that wasn't the end of it. Later that night, the nurses on Ward 13 heard strange noises coming from the morgue. They went to investigate, and they were horrified to find John's body standing upright in the middle of the room. The nurses ran back to the nurses' station and called for security. But when the security guards arrived, the morgue was empty. John's body was never seen again. These are just a few of the many disturbing stories that have been told about Ward 13. The ward was eventually closed down due to budget cuts, but the stories of its haunting past still linger. Some people say that Ward 13 is still haunted by the spirits of the patients who died there. Others say that it is a gateway to another dimension where the laws of physics do not apply. Whatever the truth may be, there is no doubt that Ward 13 was a place of darkness and despair. It was a place where the human mind could be twisted and broken, and where the veil between the living and the dead was thin.